Grandpa, tell us your name and your age now, and then tell us about your early life, when you was born, where, and so forth.
Well, my name is Joseph Schenk, born in former Austria in 1878. Came to this country with my parents in 1883. Landed in Great Bend, Kansas. And then we went out northwest of Great Bend, where the country was just newly opened, and railroads coming through there, new railroad being built over there. And we stayed around here and there until we were able to locate in an old dugout, which formerly was a homestead.
Grandpa, you came over on a boat. What kind of a boat was it that you came over?
It was a steamer, and landed in New York.
It was a cattle boat, wasn't it, Grandpa?
It was a passenger, also freight.
Passenger and freight.
Yes.
Do you remember that time when you came across? Was it?
I remember quite a few incidents, yes. I was 5 years old at the time.
Do you recall you had some brothers and sisters that came with you?
Yes, I had an older brother. He was 13, and my sister, she was 9. And then I had a sister. She was 3 years old, and another sister, she was not quite a year old.
Was that a hard trip across, Grandpa?
No, it wasn't a very hard trip. As I remember, we did have a stormy day, I believe, one time where the ship was rocking quite a bit, and I remember when we were on deck, when this wind came up, and they run us down and into the ship, and remember it dipped one time till the water came over deck, and it was running down into the ship where we were.
Did that scare you? Worry you?
Well, I didn't know much about that part, and everything seemed to be, they closed all the doors, and no more water came in. But that was just when we were going down. The water, I remember, was running down on the steps into the boat.
Now, was that a boiler-powered or a steam-powered ship?
Steam, yes, a steamer.
That was one of the earlier ones then?
Oh, yes.
Was it a large boat?
Well, I couldn't tell you how large it was, but it was a good-sized boat anyway.
And you landed in New York?
In New York, yes.
And then you came by train all the way out to Great Bend?
Yes, we went by train all the way. I believe we were about a week on the way from New York to Great Bend.
Then when you settled in Great Bend, you got kind of spread out from the rest of the family, didn't you?
Well, no, we did not stay in Great Bend. There were some people here already from our village, and they met us there the morning after we landed there. And I remember when they took us out there to their farm. And of course, then they split us up. My brother, I don't know where he went to. Somebody took him, and my sister, she stayed at the one place where we were the first night. And then we went over to another place. They were from the same village where we were from. They, of course, knew my folks. And they took us in their soddy, in their two-room soddy, over that, through that winter. That was myself and my two younger sisters. And we were there till spring, till my uncle went and bought out a homesteader.
That was Uncle Anton?
And, Uncle Nicodemus.
Nicodemus.
Yeah, and then of course there was a little shanty there, frame shanty, one room, and we were there through that summer. Then from there, his son came over during the summer, and we then moved to another place where they let us live in their house. That was a one-room soddy too.
Now, where was this from Almonds?
It was a half a mile west from where Almonds is now. There was no Almonds at the time because the railroad had not been built yet, but they had started working on it, surveying and so on.
Now, that period then, you hadn't actually went to school all the time, had you?
No, I didn't get to go to school until towards spring of 86.
86, you were about 9 years old then.
Yes, well, I wasn't 86. No, I wasn't. I was about, I was 7 going on to 8 years old.
Where did you go to school then, Grandfather?
Well, there was a little country school about 1.5 miles from our place. That was about 2 miles northwest from where Almonds is now. And I went there for 3 winters. And that school then was closed, and a school was opened up in Almonds. And that was about 3 miles from our home. But there was a school northwest of us, about 2.5 miles. So we were going to school over there.
Still was a lot of undeveloped land in the country there,
yes,
in that area.
Railroad land that time. There were some of those people that came there that had money. They went and got stock because the railroad company had the grant of land on both sides of their line for 3 miles each way, north and south, every other section. And of course they wanted the country developed. Their road was going through. They needed business. And it was being built to Pueblo. And so they didn't care how much the people had cattle on there. And so a lot of the people that came from the east, they got cattle and they were herding on railroad land, pasturing railroad land. And of course that's where my brother then got a job herding cattle right away the first year. And he was herding cattle until he was about 17, 18 years old. Then I had a job. They put me to herding cattle in the spring of 88. And herding cattle there. I think I was there about 6 months. Well, at the end of 6 months, I had earned $18.
6 months.
Besides my board. And of course, my father got the $18 for my clothes and what I needed to go when I went to school in winter. So that, as far as that part is concerned, then for 3 years straight afterwards, I was herding cattle again for a farmer north of Otis at $3 a month. And then in 92, I got a job herding cattle southeast of Olmutz, about 5 or 6 miles. And I had a herd of cattle of 165 head. Then I had a pony that I could use in herding the cattle. So I was there that year. And then, of course, in 93, I didn't get a job. I was at home during that summer. Then, of course, my father was a stonemason. He was working, building houses in the early days, sod houses, stone houses, anything like that, at $1 a day. Of course, a day that time was sun up till sundown. And of course, mother, wherever she could help, neighbors a little here and there, they'd give her maybe a little meat or a little smoked ham or something like that, and so that's the way we made a living then. And my brother finally, after herding the first 2 years for a farmer, this farmer left and went to Oklahoma. And he sold out everything and gave my brother a cow and a calf that she had for the 2 years herding. And so when he came home one evening, we were already in our dugout, and that's when we children at home just jumped with joy that we had a cow and we'd have milk and maybe a little butter.
Grandpa, going back to when you first settled there in Olmutz, around Olmutz there, where did you go to church? Did you have a church that you...
No, there was the church. The nearest church was about 4 miles west of Olmutz on a farm there. A farmer over there from Europe, from the same territory, had donated the church an acre, something like that, of ground, and also a cemetery. Mm-hmm. I have 2 aunts buried over there now.
Now, did you have a priest that came there?
Well, no, he was over there. I know for sure whether he lived there. I think he did live there until in '86, when Olmutz was started. Then, of course, some of the Catholics north of there and east of there would like to have a church too, and so they built a church in Olmutz. Mm-hmm. Then for some time after that, both churches were going, but the priest was living out there in the country, and Olmutz was his mission. Till then later, the priest says it's unnecessary that we have 2 churches that way, and so they closed the country church there, and eventually moved it to Olmutz, and built a new church. Then a few years later, and turned the old church from the country and the old church from Olmutz into schools, Catholic schools. That was, well, I don't remember what year it was, but anyway, the church was built there in Olmutz then, and that burned down in 1913, I think it was. And then, of course, we started building, and in the meantime, those 2 schools with the church burned down. So we had schools then in a whole furniture store, mm-hmm. and in a hall there, in the city hall, dance hall.
Going back just a little bit, those first days when you got over in this country, were you working for hardly nothing as compared to today?
Yeah.
It was pretty discouraging, wasn't it?
Well, I don't know. We didn't know better. We just knew that we had to help Father so he could get the start. And that's why we were, even though we didn't get much wages, he didn't have to feed us at home, see?
Mm-hmm.
So that's where we were making our own living, you might say, as children. My sister then, she off and on worked over there where my brother was herding cattle. And she was helping over there, little, the elderly folks. Until my second younger sister, that is my younger sister, younger than I, she used to work over there a little until my older sister finally got a job then, that was a few years later in Great Bend. And she was working there keeping house for a man with his children. He had 3 children. The oldest was 8 and the youngest one was 4. And he just had a lot there, and he was doing a little peddling and things like that around there. And she took care of the home, the children, done all the washing, baking, cooking, and all of that, like in the early days, for $1 a week, besides her board.
And then, Grandpa, about 1900, then you were 23 years old.
In 1900?
22 years old.
No, not in 1900. Let's see. I was born, I was in 1900. I was 12 years old.
Oh, it was 80. Yeah, that's right, too. I'm sorry. Now you said you went to school 3 winters. Did you ever go back to school and finish?
Well, I went to school 3 winters in that first school.
Mm-hmm.
Then I went over off and on in the other school, but about half my time, we had 3 head of cattle, and we had no water on the place, and we were a mile away from the creek. And of course there was some more railroad land over there, so I had to take them cows over there to water every day and herded them out there. That was railroad land, and bring them back home in the evening. So I didn't get to go to school much, neither one of those winters. Only off and on, you might say. And school terms, that time, there were only 5 months in the country. And of course the children, there were not many school children. I think about all the way from 18, I think one winter for a while, there were about 30 of them in school from all that neighborhood there. And then I started to work out then, and after I was 16, I became 17 that summer. I was working that summer for $10 a month on a farm doing all the work on 2 quarters of land. And then when I went home that fall, see, I started there about the beginning of March. And I worked there until the end of November. And so I made up my mind I wanted to go to school a while yet that winter because I haven't had much education that way, even in grade school. So I wanted to go to school then yet, and I got me a couple of second-hand books in Great Bend, and went home then, and then went to school that winter, I think about 3 months.
Do you recall the 2 books that you bought?
There's the geography, because I did like that kind of study, you know. I did love that. And I forget now whether it's a speller. No, it wasn't a speller. It might have been the arithmetic. And anyway, then the reader was just always reading, and that was all. And then, of course, arithmetic and geography and spelling, that's what we had. Well, some of them that they had other books, they had grammar and physiology, but I didn't have that. In fact, I didn't have money enough to get it with, you know. And my summer wages that first year that I worked out there, every bit of that went to my father, with the exception of a suit of clothes I bought myself. The first suit of clothes I bought, and it was a suit by a Jew in Great Bend, and he says that's the only one he had left over from winter, and he said make you special on it. It comprised a coat, vest, and 2 pair of trousers, $5.50.
Five.
Yes, well that was more than a half month's wages. Well, I bought that, and during the summer I bought myself a pair of shoes over there. And then, of course, the rest of the clothes, there's underwear and that was always homemade.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I went, well, my father came there in the spring. I wasn't there much more than a month. And he was about 3 years overdue on taxes. And he wondered if I had enough money earned there that he could pay at least the 1 year, which was not more than about $8 or $9. Well, I had that much, I think, earned. Maybe not quite. But the boss says, well, he gave him, I think, $10 or something like that. He went off that 1 year, went and paid that 1 year's taxes. He still was then 2 years in arrears. Then that was an awful poor year, but this man I worked for, he had some wheat from the year before. And my father came wanted to know if he could get a load of wheat over there for seed. So he didn't get any crop at all that year. That was in 95. So the man sold him, I think it was about 50 bushels, something like that, of wheat at 50 or 51 cents a bushel. Of course, out of my wages.
Yeah.
Well, that was over two months' wages there, see. Then when I did go home, I still had 2 $10 bills. And I think I had something like $1 or maybe a little more than $1 in change, and I kept that. When I went home, I walked home, that's 16 miles from home, on Sunday afternoon, when I quit working there, and gave him the 2 $10 bills yet. And then I went that winter to school yet, about 3 months or so. But the next year, then, that was an awful tough year. I didn't have a job that year. Had to stay at home.
That was 96, you say?
96.
Well, now, when you first came to this country, your folks couldn't speak English, probably.
Oh, no.
How did you get along with... Did anybody speak English, or did you all speak your European language?
Well, you see, most of the people around there were the foreign language.
Mm-hmm.
With the exception of boys over there and here or there, some of them east of us, well, they didn't know any German, only English, so of course we had to learn that. That's all there is to it. I remember the first day when I went to school, I didn't know anything in English. My brother, he knew a little already, and the reason I didn't get started going to school earlier, we couldn't get school books over there, you see. And there was a farmer living there, and Father got in contact with him. Well, he says, when I go to Great Bend, I'll get you from my sister. She was old enough to go to school. She was over 6, and me. So he brought us a reader apiece, first reader. We didn't have any chart or anything like that at all. First reader, that's all he brought us. And I still remember when my sister and I went to school first day, well, the teacher didn't know anything in German, and we didn't know anything in English.
Now, you spoke German?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
didn't-
Well, at home we talked also Bohemian. We talked two languages.
It was a low Bohemian, or
Yeah.
what they call
Yeah.
low German and low Bohemian.
Yes. And so I remember the first lesson when the teacher called us up, opened up the book, there was a picture in there of a dog. I still remember that. I still see it, you might say, in my mind. And that was the word, D-O-G, dog, and then says, it is a dog. I still remember that. And so the teacher wanted to say that. I didn't know what she meant. Well, she pointed to the dog. But I didn't know that word, dog. So I said dog. And then she had to tell me, it is a dog. That was the first lesson I learned in English.
Yeah.
Oh, excuse me.
Sorry. Then it was pretty hard for you to pick up English then.
Oh, yes, well, it wasn't very long because there were others there talking English, you know, and most of them were German too. But I had to learn the English there. The teacher was English. There was a boy there about my age. He was English. And then there were, eventually, that was the next winter, there were others coming over there. There were several of them coming to school there. And they were English. So, of course, that's where I began to pick it up a little better, you know, and talk it.
The winters that you talk about that you spent either going to school or not working or working, were they hard winters, Grandpa? I mean, were they bitter cold or?
There were some mighty hard, the real hard winter. You still probably hear about it or read about it off and on. The winter of 85, 86. Those were the hardest winters that I remember of. We had hard winters like them, but everything was more already improved and people were better prepared for it. But that winter, I remember it snowed and drifted for 3 days. Well, it wasn't 3 full days, but it started on a Sunday afternoon. My father wasn't at home. He was away from home about 2 miles. Went over Sunday afternoon. It was a nice Sunday, and there was a party there from the same village where we were from, and he had land over there, and they went over there kind of visit in the afternoon. And Mother and myself and 2 little girls. There were the 3 of them at home then already. Anyway, it started, a wind came up, and that evening it started snow. And it did snow, and it snowed all night. Next morning it still was snowing and blowing and drifting. And that was Monday. And Tuesday night it was still blowing hard, but I guess it wasn't snowing much anymore, but still drifting. Oh, it was terrible. And my father wasn't at home. He couldn't leave there because it was such a storm, and to go home in that 2 miles, they wouldn't let him go. So he stayed there till Tuesday morning. And then the sun came out Tuesday morning, and the afternoon it got a little better, and then he came home. And the drifts, well, they were just drifts, you know. You could crawl over them like over hills. I remember Father was telling me he cut across from there on home. He didn't follow any roads. There weren't much roads anyway. And he had to cross a little creek, Blood Creek. And he says he would not have known that he was crossing that creek only for the trees sticking up over the snow. And that's the winter when most of those people there lost a lot of animals, you know, cattle, sheep. There was one sheep ranch southwest of us. He had a few hundred sheep. I don't know how many, but he had a few hundred sheep. Well, they drifted with a storm. and he lost all of them. He might have saved one or two. I remember there was one came up to our house, and the poor animal could hardly walk. And all us kids went and got it and gave it some water, and I don't know where we got some grass or something. It was there 2 days, and it got strong enough and broke the little string we had it tied to and got away from us. And anyway, he lost his herd of sheep, and he went broke too. And well, you just couldn't go anywhere. So, and as far as having something to eat, well, people were prepared for that in this way. They had always a sack or two of flour, and then of course we had a few chickens, but that was, to kill them, that was too much because they were supposed to produce.
Yes.
But anyway, we hammered through it.
You're talking about eating almost, aren't you?
But,
Are you getting hungry?
well, I'm really not hungry. I don't get much hungry.
Why don't we quit for now, and then we'll come back after we eat dinner and talk a little bit. I got some more questions I want to ask you. Okay?
Okay.
What happened? I never even, I saw the see in the paper that they got beat and 11 innings.
I bet he walked one.
Well, we're back again.
Some more.
Well, let's go back just a little bit now. Let's say around 1900, you were 22 years old.
1900, yeah.
About that time when you met Grandma, wasn't it? Or was it before that?
Oh, no. Let's see. Yeah. Wait a minute. Well, of course, I hadn't seen her before and so on, but it was 1900 when I began to think then about having a girlfriend.
Uh-huh. What was Grandma's maiden name?
Tuziska.
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 Did I say that right? Tuziska?
Yeah.
What was Grandma's first name?
Teresa.
Teresa. And where did they live, Grandpa?
They lived about 4 or 5 miles northwest of Otis.
Of Otis. Now, how did you meet Grandma?
Oh, well, I've seen her in church occasionally, and at dances. And so that's where I got acquainted with her. And it's closer acquainted.
I mean, about what time was it, Grandpa, that you got married?
Well, we got married in the fall, in September 1901. About the end of September.
Towards the end of September. Remember the date?
The date? No, I don't know just the exact date.
On the 29th?
I don't know. It was a latter part of September. Yeah.
This was in 1901. Then.
1901, yeah.
Now, where did you first live? Where was your home at then?
Well, we lived, my father had 2 quarters of land. The homestead, that is where we lived on, and then they had the quarter alongside of it. And he gave me that quarter over there. And of course he still lived with my brother. My brother wasn't married. He lived over there on the homestead then until my brother got married. I had lost my arm then, and I told him he could live in my house over there. So he lived there until he died.
Now, you lost your arm. When was it, Grandpa?
That was in August 1902.
1902.
It wasn't quite a year after we got married.
Can you tell us a little bit about how that happened?
Well, yes. The way it happened, I was doing a little field work, cutting corn, and I finished. And about that time, let's see, was it father or mother came over. The wind started blowing very hard, and the wire on the windmill up above broke, to shut it off. And so they couldn't shut it off, see. So I think it was Mother came over and wondered if I could go over there and see if I could do something about it. It was a 30-foot tower. Father was old. Well, he never did climb windmills, and so I went over there to shut that windmill off if possible. Well, there wasn't much to do, only get up there, and if I could, fasten something, a rope or something up there, see, and pull it in, turn it out of gear some way. And while I was trying to fasten the rope up there, I was reaching up with my hands, why there's a pitman pin on the windmill, where the pump rod is on, coming round right close past the tower, see, the stand. And it got me, I felt it grazed me a little bit before once, and but it didn't bother me. I could still do it. And first thing I knew, it caught my arm and pushed it in right in that little gap. Well, there was just a very little space that way. Pushed it right through there, see, that pitman pin against that tower stem. Well, then of course I jerked my hand out and it slumped down. The bone was crushed from the elbow down about 2-3 inches. And it wasn't broke, it only broke, but it's crushed. So...
You actually didn't lose consciousness, no?
No, I didn't lose conscience or anything, but I didn't know what to do for a moment. I sat down. It was just it was a 3-post tower, you never see them anymore, and just a small platform, just big enough to stand on, The worst of it was, the opening was on the north side, and the wind was high from the northeast. And you know how they sometimes shift back and forth. Well, when I was climbing up there, I was afraid to go through there, so under the platform, I worked round to the southwest corner and got over the platform. And that's the way I got up on top there. Well, then I was up there and told Father, it crushed my arm, it broke my arm. So now, of course, he was all upset. He didn't know what to do. He was down below there, Mother was there too. And my brother, he was out in the field working. And I had my horse hitched up to the buggy on my way. I was going to town anyway, so I went by there to stop that windmill if I could. So she said, "You'll go after John and see if he can help me down some way." Then, gosh, the blood, the artery was cut too. See, the blood was just shooting out. Well, what could I do? I sat down there a little bit, and then I got to thinking, he went out there in the field to get him. I thought, well, now what will he do when he comes here in this little platform? There'll be 2 of us here, maybe both of us will follow. So I made up my mind to watch that wheel a little bit, and watched it every once in a while to get away from that opening, see. I thought, well, I'll take a chance. I slipped through there. When that gets over there, I crawled over there to that opening, and I got my feet there, right ready, and when it went over to the northeast, just enough clearance, I started down. I started down as fast as I could, holding on. Of course, I couldn't use my left arm. That was dangling. That just crushed and broke off. So I finally got down until it got this far, until the wheel came back again. Well, then, of course, I ducked against the tower as much as I could, and it come and hit me slightly across the shoulder on the side of it. Not this thing all was off. But when it fell up a little bit, I slipped through, and of course I was lean against the ladder, till I get a new hold lower with my hand, and then went a couple steps down, and so that way it cleaned out, see. By the time John came and Father, I was down already. Well, when I got down before they came, I went up to the house and told Mother to she took a handkerchief or something and told her to tie it real tight right above the elbow. So you could stop that bleeding as much as possible. Well, that was pretty hard to do. I tell you, that did hurt. When she tied it tight, that did hurt then. It hurt more than the crushed arm. So then, of course, when they come, my father got in a buggy with me right away and took me to town. It's 3 miles. And we were lucky the doctor was there. But, again, he was in a predicament. Just 2 weeks before that, he had, his son was home on the summer vacation. He was to graduate that next winter as a physician. And he was at home on vacation, and he was working, there was a little drugstore there in town, and he was working over there, and he had an accident there with spilled alcohol, and had a lamp there, coal oil lamps. There were no electric lights at that time. And that thing exploded, and he was all burnt. He ran over to the office, half a block from there. And of course the doctor had him there, you see, and he was telling me then afterwards, he says, you know, he says, I was just about as bad shape as you was. I didn't know what to do. He says, I saw my own boy lying there, yet he says, he was in that chair. He died then overnight too. And he says, that's just reminded me so much. He says, I couldn't do anything. He took, he had one of those tourniquets, or whatever they would call them, and he tightened that on there and busted it. He hadn't used it for a long time, I guess, and it was getting weak. And he tried again, and he just had no success. Finally, he did. There was some came in there, you know, looking and so on. So he had to take turnabout holding my artery there, see. But I was pretty near bled to death then. I could hardly stand up anymore. So they kept changing off, and he finally did. So now he says, I can't do anything with it. He says, I'm alone here. He told me this, and he says, I was there. And he says, I just couldn't do a thing, he says. And so he called, telegraphed, I had no telephone. He telegraphed to Hoisington to Dr. Cook to come out. Well, no automobiles that time was with horses, see. And got a message, answer right away, said Dr. Cook is in Great Bend, but he's on his way home with a team of horses. So he'll be at home, we'll send him right over. Well, he got home, and the doctor telegraphed him from Hoisington again, about half an hour or so later, and says, well, he says, he told the doctor there, I can't drive them horses anymore, he says, but he was a railroad doctor. He says, there's a freight pulling out of here, and I'll come on that freight. And it was the first stop, you might say, out of Hoisington. Yeah, but by the time he got out there, it was 10 o'clock at night. And when this happened, this accident, it was 5 o'clock in the afternoon. But anyway, he came in an awful thunderstorm that we had that time. And then I was thinking about my wife at home. We weren't there a year yet, and she was out there, you might see, in a prairie, all alone. Didn't know what had happened or anything. Well, Mother told her that I got hurt. She went over and told her that I got hurt, but she didn't know whether it was very bad. She didn't want to scare her, I guess. And there she was all alone with that whole night, too, and I was thinking about her, too. And so anyway, Cook, when he came out, and he looked at, well, he says, you got a Doc Atkin there, he says, you give him the chloroform. And of course, I started to pass out. I do remember when the doctor took my arm, threw it across here, and looked at it, and says, Doc, he says, there's nothing we can do about it but take the arm off. I still heard that, and I made some remark, I don't remember just what it was. So then, of course, under chloroform, when I came to, well, that was the first thing I looked over. I saw just bandaged stump there. Mm-hmm. And so then, you know, nobody came out. Father stayed overnight there in Almonds, and I stayed right there. Doctor had a little cot there in the office, so he laid me down on that. the next morning, my cousin Anton Schenk came to town about something, and he heard about it, so he came over, and it was around about 10 o'clock in the morning, maybe a little earlier. He says, and there's racing on, anything about it? No, I told him, I don't know whether Mother told her or not. I said, but she hasn't been here yet. So he says, I'll go out there and get her. He drove out and got her. And so then, of course, I had to stay there. Then down, heck, I couldn't get up at all. There was a little rock there. The merchant, he had a little house over there, kind of a tenant house. It's vacant. And so there's a little bedding there, and we stayed over there then.
You didn't have any children at that time then?
No. Albert was born then later, next year then, following year.
How long were you there then, Grandpa? Say, week, 10 days, or at this little place in?
I was there about two weeks, I guess. Yeah, I know when I first got up, I could sit up a while, and I thought, well, I'll try to walk. I guess I made a step, and I felt like collapsing, I had to just throw myself back on the bed again. But I tried it a few times, and I began to get.
How long were you at the farm then, Grandpa?
Well, I lived there till the following spring. When the fellow, see that drugstore that almost I was telling you about, his doctor's son burned up. That burned down. And the fellow that owned it at the time.
Farm?
Yeah.
How long were you at the farm then, Grandpa?
Well, I lived there till the following spring. When the fellow, see that drugstore that almost I was telling you about, his doctor's son burned up. That burned down. And the fellow that owned it at the time, he went and built it up again. And it did salvage little stuff, not much out of there. And he started again. But he knew nothing about business. Well, I didn't either, as far as that goes. I didn't even have a good grade school education, you might say. But anyway, he couldn't make it a go. He wanted to sell it. I sized it up and was thinking about it, and talked to Father about it. And he thought if I thought I could do that, I know I couldn't farm, and I told the missus, I says, I'm afraid I'll have to go back on my promise that we'd stay on a farm. Well, she says, well, anything you think you can do, she says, don't make a living. So, of course, I thought it over, and of course, I had to buy it the only way he'd do, he wanted the money. So, of course, I bought that. In fact, Father bought it. I didn't have anything in my name yet. I had the promise of that quarter that was mine now, but I had not paid for it yet, or anything, and so I didn't have a deed to it yet. So Father went and bought this place, and then later deeded it to me. It was in his name too. Then later deeded it to me. And then as soon as I made enough, I went and paid him off what I owed on the land, what I owed him for the quarter. And got straightened out, and of course done the best I could, but there's a small business, and family was increasing, and well, I was making a living all right, but that's about all. So when the livery barn there burned down, and I was thinking about taking over this. I was thinking, hey, we need a livery barn here. That was that time with horses yet, And I did have 3 horses, So I went and put up a livery barn. And of course then the automobiles started coming in, see. And so I tried an automobile, and I thought I could run one. So I got that first international automobile and had it for a while, but it wasn't much of a car, you know. Too much trouble with it. Of course, that's the way it went on then. We had the barn there and the little draying and one thing or other like that, and then horses. I had 3 teams of horses, 2 road teams and 1 dray team. So I finally hired help there to run the barn for me.
Now your family weren't grown up then. They were still small.
Yeah, they were just all small, yeah.
Now tell me about the family, Grandpa. The oldest one is Uncle Al.
Yeah.
There was a child before Uncle Al, was it?
Yes, there was a little boy. He lived about a week, I guess.
I see.
He died. Then with Albert and George and Tom and
Albert and George and who?
George and Jeff and Tom, Jeff, and then Leonard.
Leonard. Was there any girls?
Between yes, after after Jeff, there was a girl born. Leonard was the last one. There was a girl born, stillborn.
So you had the 5 boys then. Now
Leonard was born in 1917 already.
Now this is when you had the drugstore.
Yes.
And
the livery barn. Well, I was running that until we moved to Hayes. All we ever had over there. Yet the auto livery had discontinued. Wasn't much in there anymore because the traveling men, they were all getting their own cars. See, I used to haul them the deal. And of course, I didn't have use for the horses. I sold them out. Both driving teams, and then kept the dray team.
But when you had the horses, though, you put the boys to work hauling coal and milk and
yes, when they were big enough, after the hired man that I had there, there wasn't enough work for him anymore. So the boys took over, just a little dray from the depot to the depot and so on. And, that's about all there was.
Well, then, in 1923, Leonard was about 4 years old, 6 years old. You came to Hayes.
Well, he was 5 years old.
What was your decision to come to Hayes?
Well, his business wasn't hardly going far enough, to educate the boys. Albert had a high school in Atchison. Well, he was away from home, and it is more expensive than it could have been at home. And of course, then he wanted college education. Well, that would have been Creighton, and of course, he was pretty good that way, and he learned easy and so on, and he wanted to be a druggist. And then, of course, the others were growing up too. Well, I thought I'd like to give them all an education, but I didn't have business enough. So I was trying to reach out a little further, since Albert already was in Creighton the first winter, and he could, if he was good in his studies, he could make it in 2 years, what I understood. So there was a feller who wanted to sell out over at Holyrood, his drugstore. And I went over there. A feller over at Otis, the druggist at Otis, he wanted to leave over there, I guess, and he came over and talked to me about it. He says that the feller over there at Holyrood, he says, wants to sell out. If you want to move, he says, why don't you go over there? He says, I'd like to I thought I'd leave. I guess he was, like they had a little more wages, they couldn't pay him anymore. Well, I told him, I said, I'm not very well educated, when it gets into a bigger business and so on. Well, he says, I tell you, I'll work for you. So he came over one Sunday and we drove over to Holler Road. Well, it was closed, but the man found the man and he showed us the place and so on through there. I had a doctor there. And he told me, he says, well, there is nothing, no competition here in this town. And he says, the nearest is a little town over there south. And so I thought it over and took him back home. And then I talked to the missus about it. Well, I told her, I want you to see it. I can see you. I promised the fellow I'd be back in a week or two. So I took her over there. She said, how about church? First question. Well, we looked. There was a little Catholic church there. But the weeds were up as high as the windows. Found out about that. Well, they had a mission. So there once a month, the priest came over there. I think there were about 4 or 5 families there. Well, that didn't sit very good with her, but she says, well, if you think you can make it, it's up to you. Well, I finally thought it over and I told the fellow again, I says, well, I'll let you know in a couple of days. And, or did I tell him right away I'd take it? I don't remember now. Anyway, I went home and first thing I knew, the fellow came in and he says, hey, I understand you're wanting to buy a drugstore. Well, I says, yes, I was figuring on one. I spoke for one. I promised the fellow I'd take it, but I didn't make any down payments, so we're talking. He says, I know of one I believe you'd like better. So on. Well, I says, where's that at? He says, in Hayes. And it was Charlie Miller from Hayes here, real estate man. Roy, his brother, is still here. Charlie is dead now, so he's his other brother. Well, I talked to this fella and I promised him that I told him I'll buy it. Well, he says, you better, before you do, he says, you better come and look it over. He says, this fella there, he says, he wants to sell out. The old man is working in there, he says, and his wife, they is a druggist, and his wife is a druggist too, pharmacist. And this fellow that owns it, well, he is not a businessman and like that. He's a regular trader jumping from job to job of some kind. So I came over here, and I took Arnold from Otis Long again. And we stayed here overnight and looked it up and said, let's go to those college buildings. Well, I went down there and he says, do you know, I believe this will be a better deal for you than that over there. He says, in the first place, he says, at college here, there's always students here. And then it's a bigger town. He says, there are only 2 other drugstores here. There's a hospital here at the St. Anthony's. And he says, I believe, if I were you, I believe this would be the best deal. Well, I asked him, I says, well, will you go with me? Yes, he says, I'll go with you. So then I went home and told more about it again. And told her what the setup was here, well, whatever I thought. But she says, well, good church over there. And all of that. We knew, of course, Hayes. Well, in fact, I'd been over to Hayes a few times, initiations, Knights of Columbus and so on. I told her, had a nice big church here. So she says, that's all right with her, anywhere you go. So I wrote the feller over there, and I told him that I had the stories that I had to back out. And of course, then I was waiting for Arnold to let me know when he's ready to go. And gosh, it was already March, and he didn't say anything. I finally went over there once and talked to him. Well, he didn't know. He couldn't get away just now. So I went over and I finally bought over here. And then he wasn't coming over. Finally I drove over there and talked to him. Well, he says, I guess I have to back out. He says, they increased my wages and begged me to stay and so on. And, well, I had the old lady. Now, in the meantime, when we came here, the druggist, that was old Stewart, he died. He was, when I took the place over, he wasn't buried yet, but he was dead. So his wife said she was old. She was in her 70s. She says, I'll take his place, she says, but she says, it'll take a couple of days till I have to have rest after his funeral. So
She actually was a pharmacist.
she was a pharmacist too, yes. We were both. And of course I got in with the attorney Wiesner here. He was a KC, and he says, well, I'll help you out what you can if you need any help. And he was building a new house, and it took me over there, and he says, you can, till you move your family over, you and the boy can sleep with us over there.
Right. The boy, who was this?
George.
This was George. And Al was still in school then?
Yes, he was.
Was he in Creighton then?
He was in Creighton.
And he took up pharmacy then?
Yes, he was taking pharmacy. He had one more winter to go though. He was finishing the first term.
This Wiesner you talked about,
He was a lawyer, attorney. He's dead. He was an attorney. And so I took that over, and she was with me a while. Well, I got talking to some of those older people here. Well, they said, if you can get you a different druggist, you'll do well, because she is not taking very well. Well, I could see that right away. She just, too much talk, too much mouth, and too much criticism and so on. So I advertised for a pharmacist then and got an answer, but I had him. I thought, well, if I can make a year with him anyway, go along with him for a year. And I think I just made about a year, but Albert was still in, he making the second year. And so he quit then. He quit. Well, I didn't care very much if he did. But I got another feller. He had been in Holyrood, by the way, and he came over here then. And he stayed with me then till Albert graduated, he and his wife. And they had a son in school too. So then when Albert graduated, see, he didn't pass the first examination. That was in May. So he had to take another one in August, and he passed that one the second time. And then, of course, he took over, and I had kept this feller about a while yet, a couple of months or so, till Albert got a little initiated, you might say, in this. And of course, then I had the other boys, made them all work in the store. Of course, I usually had a girl there at the fountain, but the boys were doing the other work, and I'd done away with clerks and outside clerks, So that way then worked up a little. But I tell you, that first year was hard. That first year now, the store rent wasn't so high, $75 a month, but the $75, there was a druggist, $150 a month, and the residents $40 a month. And the first year, at the end of the year, figured out I was $500 in the hole. And no crop. There was some wheat that year, but just as they started, here and there, one farmer started harvesting in the afternoon, a hailstorm coming and cleaned up everything from Walkeeny to past Hayes here a little ways, and from here on to Russell. Everything was hailed out. Not a spear of wheat was cut anymore. And so you see that was a bad thing here, and
It was pretty discouraging in the first year you were in business.
It was discouraging. But then the prospects looked good. And then in 24, well, we got settled down a little and got stocked up a little. The stock was run down terrible. And built up a little and began to go a little better. So, of course, from then on, went along a little better. The boys then wanted to, I guess Tom here had a one-year high school yet in Atchison, but he could finish here, and Jeff wanted to go to high school. He hadn't had high school at all, so they were in school, and after school they were in the store.
Then the store grew and grew and grew, and then of course you finally bought the store, didn't you?
Well, this one, yes, but this was, we first were renting over there, if you know where the Baker Shoe Store is.
Mm-hmm.
We were in there. Block, the other block north, yeah. We were there 5 years when the Reader had this building, built that, and his renter had quit him, and I guess he couldn't get a renter. Well, he wanted to sell, that's what he wanted. And so he come asked me. Well, we were here 5 years, and I still had a little interest over there in Olmutz, in the bank there, a small interest in there. And I figured, I told him, I says, Mr. Reader, I says, we've come to terms, that says I can't pay you the whole thing, but I can make you a down payment and so on. Well, he says, I don't want it all, he says. Make it, he says, for a year or two, he says, we'll pay so much. And so I did. I went and gathered up about $10,000 to pay down on it. And then moved in there and started over on my own. That I figured it this way, not here. There I was paying rent. Here I'll be in here, I'll be paying tax, but that time it wasn't high. About $300 a year, I believe. And upstairs, there were 3 rooms occupied, I believe, and they were paying $25 a room. And I'll have that rent up there, and I won't have to pay rent down here. So I thought that would be a pretty good deal. I never thought of that.
Then you never were in any other business here in Hayes besides the drugstore?
No, that's all.
That was all.
That was
really enough.
That wasn't that really more than I could very well take care of, but I done the best I could.
Grandpa, tell me, when was it that Grandma died, approximately? Can you remember that?
She died in March 12th, in 38, yeah.
How old? Grandma was probably
She was about,
60?
no, she was about 50.
59.
She was 58, 58 years old. Let's see, 58. Yeah, that's right, she was born in, yeah, she was 58 years old, and she died in the spring. If she'd lived till October, she would have been 59, yeah. 50. Yeah.
In October. See, 9 from 79 to 38 to be 9, and she would have been 59 in October. She was 58 plus. That's right, 58 plus.
Grandma had a long illness, did she?
No. there, let's see, she was there about a week.
Well, first you had the flu for a week, and then
Yeah.
she was ailing and got so you wasn't recouping. You said you couldn't take care of her. By the time she come to the hospital, she used to run down already, you know. And she was up there with several ladies. She told the doctor, she says, "I'm getting pneumonia." He said, "No, you aren't." She said, "I know I've had it before." And then he waited another day or so, and then he took X-rays and found out she was filling up. She had 1 week lung, or better lung was filling up then.
Let's see, she was there just a week, I believe. I think it was Saturday when I took her over there.
She was up there about a week. She was up there.
Yeah, because I went then Monday when I was up there. I see she was there over Sunday, and Monday I was up there. She was getting along. She was sitting up. She says, "Take me home." Oh, I says, "Why you feel that strong?" She says, "There's nothing wrong with me. I feel all right." She says, "I was in church yesterday." She says, "Went to communion. That is not to church, but then to the chapel." And she says, "Went to communion, and I feel all right." And so I said, "You better stay till you get strong enough." So Tuesday I went over again. "Well," she says, "I want to go home." And well, I said, "What the doctor say?" "Well, he told me I'd better not, but what shall I do up here?" She says, "I'm sitting up here and just killing time." Well, I says, "If the doctor told you," I says, "you better stay." I says, "And I tell you, I'll be here in the morning and I'll take you home." So when I went down Wednesday morning, I went there and she was in bed. And I said, "Well, what's the matter? Not feeling good?" "No," she says, "I have the pneumonia." And just overnight, you know, that way, she told me that the doctor told her that, she told him, and the doctor said that she did that. So I talked to the doctor, yeah. He says, "And I'm prayed," he says. "I'm prayed that her good lung, that's affected too." See, she'd had pneumonia once before, so one lung was weak. And this set in the other side, and he says, "I'm afraid that weak lung won't carry her over." And it didn't. So we, Saturday night, and well, early Sunday morning, about 3 o'clock, I guess it was when she died. Or was it 5 o'clock, something on there.
Saturday morning.
Was it Saturday morning? Yeah, Saturday morning.
Now you were living where you're now.
Yes, we had just moved in there. We moved in there in 35, and this was 38.
This was the last house on the northwest or northeast corner of Hayes. Your house. Yours out.
One of the-
You were on the edge of town then.
Yeah.
Now you're in the middle of town practically, aren't you?
Oh yes, I guess the town is further north than it is south.
Is that right?
You have 32nd Street up here.
Well, now you were all alone, Grandpa, and
Yeah.
you got by.
Mhm.
You just had the one arm, and you had to do all those things like tie your shoe, and of course you learned all that beforehand, of course, but
Yeah.
it was pretty hard for you, wasn't it, living alone?
It is hard, yeah.
Then you remarried.
Yeah.
What was her name?
Her name was Barbara Bright,
Barbara Bright.
widow.
And when did you get married? Remarried?
It was in 50. Let's see. No, 40. 30, 40, 30, 39 in the spring, 38, 39 in the summer.
A year later, after Grandma
Yeah,
died.
it's over a year.
It was over a year,
yeah.
yes.
Maybe
And,
a year and a half.
And you lived in the house that you live in now.
Yeah.
And Grandma Bright then died in what year was it?
In 51.
In May of 51.
Mm.
She was about your age, Grandpa?
She was, I guess, a little older. A little over a year older.
Looking back over your early life, and there must have been a lot of trials and tribulations there all the way through. What was one of the most disappointing things of your life? Can you recall one of the most disappointing things? There was a lot of disappointments, I know, but
Well, the most disappointing was to lose my arm.
to lose your arm.
Yeah. Of course, there were a lot of reverses, but then everybody has those, you know, this and that, you know. But that was the worst one.
Over your years, you
That and losing my losing my wife.
Grandma Teresa, Grandma, in 1938, of course. You probably recall, did you ever receive that diploma that you often thought about?
A diploma?
Diploma. Did you ever receive a grade school diploma?
No, there was
Or
no
a grammar
such
school diploma?
No, there was no diplomas that time at all. When you quit, you quit.
You quit.
Yeah.
Have you, is there anything you'd live different in your life if you had it to do today? If you could, say it.
Well, if I imagine I'd go back to the farm.
You'd like to go back to the farm?
I believe so, because that is, if I was to start over again, I believe I'd rather live that. I think it's a better life. It's hard and all of that, you know, but my gosh, it's hard everywhere.
Yes.
Only that there is more physical work, and while this other, I tell you, it's no fun to live a lot of times. Yeah.
You have a certain amount of joy in tilling the soil and
Well, yes, I
being
like
out in the fresh air and
Well, yes, and then you see that's where I grew up, working in the fields and studying it. Now these people came over from Europe. Well, they had their way of farming over there. See, well, when they got here, they found it was not that way. There was a lot of land here, but they had to find out first what to raise, how to raise, and all of that. Well, that's when I was working out away from home, especially that 1 year there. I worked for that fellow there. That was in 95. He was studying. He came from Illinois. And he was studying this farming here. He was one of the early settlers. And we were talking that way, talking quite a bit. He says, I'm doing this and I'm doing that way. And I'm figuring that with according to the moisture we get in this country, how to preserve it and all of those things. Well, you know, that was interesting to me. And I got a very good start there, you know, that way. Well, when I came home,